The way I would describe it, it's like engineers trying to fix an airplane in mid-air.
Ahla wa sahla, Samir Basha. I'm doing well, thank you for asking. How about you, my dear friend?
So this week, OpenAI did two things that seems unrelated, but I think there's a subtle action happening by OpenAI, and these actions are actually linked to each other. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about GPT 4.5 and the new API-only GPT 4.1 and the untold story from OpenAI. Again, everyone's creating videos about GPT 4.5 and GPT 4.1 now, and there's a big elephant in the virtual room, I guess, no one is addressing. And that has to do with the podcast that OpenAI, or podcast-like episode that OpenAI dropped on YouTube that talks about the pre-training of GPT 4.5 and also the subtle hints that they dropped that I noticed when they introduced the GPT 4.1 API. And definitely those hints are louder if you read through the documentation or the page they put out there to introduce the GPT 4.1 for API. But to really understand the full story, we need to break down GPT 4.5 and then the announcement of GPT 4.1 on API only. And to do that, I will actually try to digest the whole podcast they've done about the pre-training of GPT 4.5 for us to see, is there any real insight of what they're doing in such a closed source company when it comes to pre-training or training in general their models. And the second part will be me taking you through the announcement, at least what they put out there on their website around GPT 4.1 for the API access only for now, and the details of it that everyone else is covering. I'll give it to you also in a digested manner. And later on, I will test 4.1 for its coding capability that they claim. And lastly, I will end up by linking the whole events that are happening in OpenAI and what I believe have happened within the organization that led to these moves, maybe it's the right term, and the tactics that OpenAI, at least I think they did during this week to address a potential problem they had on their hands. Now, if you watched already videos around GPT 4.5 or you watched too much about GPT 4.1 and the API, or you're not interested in that, you're going to have the chapters. You can skip from one to other or just go to the conclusion if that's what you're looking for. I would advise you to watch the whole thing. Definitely there's benefit in really understanding what a company like OpenAI is telling us they're doing, even at a high level. But you have the choice to skip through chapters, so choose wisely. And with this and without any further ado, let's get started.
Subscribe to Daddy's channel, The Mic.
So let's start from here. This is the YouTube episode I am talking about that maybe is not watched by so many people. So it's watched already by 234,000 people. And this was dropped 4 days back by OpenAI on their YouTube channel. Now, it was weird. It's a closed source company and they're very sensitive about things. And they drop this kind of podcast setup where they have a machine learning guy, an infrastructure guy, and even an algorithm guy from OpenAI. And they have a chat about the story of GPT 4.5 and which is not really talked about as a model a lot. And you'd assume doing such a thing, there's lots of hype around 4.5, which I don't see. And they do it in a weird way. They tell stories about the team, which is interesting, and I'm going to cover that. But when I saw that, I had, okay, this is new. Maybe they're trying to do a new form. Later on, I saw something that changed my mind. This wasn't subtle. This wasn't random. This wasn't them trying new mediums or ways to maybe market or advertise OpenAI. I don't think they need it. Definitely not this way. And you'll get that hint with me. But I'll just cover the highlights of the conversation they had, 46 and 33 seconds long. I'll try to do it in less than 10 minutes, which took us through the journey of pre-training and developing GPT 4.5 that maybe not all of us, but many of us who have probably subscription or access to the API tested. And as usual, I used the mind map to explain this whole thing to you. This is a convenient way for me to align my brain, and I know for many people they like it because you can see what I'm talking about in points, so probably you understand better or definitely remember it better. And this remains with me. If anyone wants it, put a comment in the comment section. I'm happy to share it with the community. Okay, so let's start with the introduction. It's an unusual podcast format, as I mentioned already, and they were discussing the research behind GPT 4.5, and they're not promoting the product. So they're not just pushing a product, GPT 4.5 itself or anything else. They're just having this kind of casual setting, talking about the story of GPT 4.5. And they say, and they stress, it exceeded expectations. So they say users reported it was so different from GPT-4. And also they say that their goal was to make this model 10 times smarter than GPT-4. And then they say development actually started 2 years before the release. I honestly am not sure how true or not this is. 2 years, like the whole thing started 2 years back. We got GPT 3.5 2 years back. Did they really start the project of developing GPT 4.5 at the same time they are actually shipping GPT 3.5? That's a big question mark, honestly, for me. And that means if it's true that today they're working at GPT 5.5, if not GPT 6. Anyways, so this is the introduction to the podcast. And then they started off the bat to talk about challenges. So let's cover that. So they go into the point of what it takes to actually make a giant model like this one. Now, we don't know the number of parameters for this model, but it could be well into the trillions. And here they say it takes a lot of people, a lot of time, and a lot of compute. And that was Alex. I think Alex is the ML guy, the machine learning guy. And then extensive planning and de-risking runs. So this is interesting. So they say when you do a huge run, like the supposed one for GPT 4.5, things that do not appear in small runs will appear on huge runs. And things that, when I say things, it's errors or issues. Issues that appear on smaller, more manageable runs that are not a big problem become a big problem when you have a huge run. Now, all of this is interesting, by the way. So this is why I want to cover it. We will learn a lot by going through this one. And also they say this project actually involved hundreds of people in OpenAI. So that's interesting. So it took a huge team and a lot of time to really bring this through. Scaling difficulties. So now they're going with a much bigger model, something they've never done before. So there are difficulties with this. So again, problems at massive scale are fundamentally different. So they're saying the problems are different when you go to that scale. And here they said, as I mentioned just now, rare occurrences become catastrophic at scale. So they have to be really sure. They have to do things, do all of these test runs, calibrate things perfectly, know exactly what to do if whatever event happens, bad or good event, how to act as a team, and which team has to handle it. So clearly they were handling a complex operation going to train the GPT 4.5. And then interesting insight is that once you've accomplished something, it becomes much easier to repeat. And here Sam Altman actually asked an interesting question. And he asked them, knowing what you know after training GPT 4.5, how much would it take you in terms of people to train GPT-4 again? And they said GPT-4 could now be trained with just 5 to 10 people. But pushing the frontier always requires massive effort. Again, this is one more hint. They're talking about it in a way that there's value. You know, we did something great, and now because we did this thing, we can train something like GPT-4, which is an important model. We can do it and retrain the model with 5 to 10 people max. Okay, it was interesting to know, but also one more hint that we will figure out step by step as we go through this episode. So this is the scale challenge. Let's close it. Let's go to the technical hurdles. Just look at them quickly. So these are nice to know if you're interested in the domain of AI. Multi-cluster training was necessary. So they didn't do it in one GPU cluster. they needed to do multi-cluster. So this is basically clusters of GPUs geographically divided. So basically they have used multi-data centers to train a single model. And they said the previous stack wasn't enough, needed new approaches to state management. Now, when they say stack, I presume they talk about the whole system that they run as they are training the model. And that includes the hardware itself, that includes the software that runs the hardware, and the actual software that they run for the training itself of the model and the data and everything, orchestrating the whole thing. So they had to reinvent, really for the first time, something new that got them to train 4.5. And here they talk about failure rates and that they are higher early in a new hardware generation's lifetime. Okay, so here I presume they're talking about using newer NVIDIA GPUs as part of the training. And then they mention for the next 10x, I assume, scale of training, they need fault tolerance co-designed with the workload. And then they mention a story about a torch-some bug. It's an interesting story, fun to listen to, I guess. So there was that error happening, they tried to resolve it, it kept coming. Eventually, one of the OpenAI team found there was one liner, and this is part of the interesting insight that you get part of this story is that how complex running these things is. So you have a huge team as the training is happening, they're getting these errors, they're looking at if that has an effect on the model itself and its performance, and they're trying to fix the error itself. And they're in the middle of that kind of chaos for months at end while the model is training. The way I would describe it, it's like engineers trying to fix an airplane in mid-air. So you'd imagine that. So if an airplane had a big failure and they tell you, oh, don't worry about it, there's an engineer going out to the tail wing or to the wing itself, to the engine to fix it right now. This is how, from the way they talk about it, it feels. Here they talk about a persistent error that they had. Eventually one person caught a single line with a very easy, at least when you find it, it seems easy, fix that took away most of the most of the errors coming out of this issue they were facing. And lastly, they talk about predictions and reality. So the training time took longer than projected. So they projected less, but it was taking more. The team morale improved dramatically when performance issues were resolved. So I think when they got to see that the performance of the model is actually improving, the errors going down, the variance is going down, so the model is learning, is getting smarter, it's predicting more accurately to at least the goals that they have in mind. I'm sure they have also metrics that are internal, they will not share with the whole world. The energy change in the team, this is what they say, because things started to work after a long time of work and planning and actual execution. And then once they've seen that, well, ETA, the actual date of delivery, moved from 2 years to something tangible, something they can put a date on it. Okay, so this is just an insight into the technical issue. The data efficiency revolution. So they talk about a paradigm shift in training these models, and they say the world hasn't realized yet that we are no longer compute constrained. So they say that this time the problem wasn't compute. Every time they trained the model in the past, the bottleneck was compute. This time it was not compute, it was actually data. So they mention here that data is now the bottleneck for top models. And we'll discuss briefly what they mean by data in this sense. We were largely compute constrained through GPT-4, but now with 4.5, we are data bound. And here they talk about it, not in one sequence across the podcast, about how they look at data, which is super interesting, honestly. If you have the time, watch the whole thing. But they talk about that quality data is a constraint by itself. And when you train the model, you need data that they know is not available out there from the internet or the sources where the model is getting trained, which is basically the whole internet. Probably they figured out to put the whole internet through that model training. They want something that the model never seen before to really tell if the model is generalizing or not. And generalizing means, is the model able to articulate or think like a human? This is the whole concept behind artificial intelligence. If they train a model on all of the data, whatever they throw it probably it is something that the model has seen before or trained on before. So it becomes a problem to tell, is the model answering well because it was trained on that data, or is it answering well because it can generalize like a human does? While they do not believe that we are at that level of a model really performing like a human or generalizing. And this is what they cover here in the human learning gap, what they call the human learning gap. So they say models are astronomically far away from human data efficiency. We are very efficient in our data as humans, possibly 100,000x less efficient than humans at language learning, for example. So this is something still a struggle. And then data efficiency is the new frontier of AI research. Again, their claim, they're saying data efficiency is where most research will be going, or where the biggest problem stands. And when we say data efficiency, we're talking about how can a model, so you can have the same set of data and it's good quality data. Humans interpret that data differently than AI today. And this is what they're saying about the 100,000x less efficient AI being than humans. A human, if you take a human through a training that involves data, information they're consuming, they can actually generalize. So they can apply that learning to something new they've never seen before. So the brain is so unique till today, at least, and this, humans are unique in this aspect. So you can have an experience and you can apply the learning somewhere else that doesn't have to do anything with the original experience you had. AI can't do that. So if you train AI on doing a certain task and you shift it to another task, it doesn't really perform well compared to humans. At least this is what I understand they're saying. And here they say 10% here, 20% there, improvements will stack together. So they're optimistic, but they're saying models are not there. Data efficiency is the biggest problem. So with this, let's go to the science behind the model. This is the interesting part that I always am intrigued by. Maybe they reveal something that they didn't reveal before. Let's see, they hint things. They don't give us really something to work with. Again, it's a closed model. So why pre-training works. So this is just a topic that is being discussed. Now, in previous episodes, I have covered different papers, AI papers, where I cover the logic of pre-training and then the supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning, yada yada. So you can go there and watch them. But for now, what you need to understand is that most companies, when they develop their models, the first phase is pre-training, what they call pre-training. And this is a phase where they dump the model with a huge amount of unlabeled data. And this is where they expect the model to generalize, just learn text and other mediums like images or video. And they think that this is the best way to train a model to learn from that data and maybe generalize in other tasks later on or down the line. Definitely this way is more efficient and the outcomes are more promising than the older ways where they actually fine-tune task by task and they do other stuff. Again, I have lots of videos around many papers that touch on these concepts, but this is the general idea of it. And here they talk about compression is intelligence. This is Dan explaining. So Dan, I think he's the algorithm guy. He's the guy that looks like Sheldon. I hope that he doesn't take it as an insult if he ever watches this from the Big Bang Theory. He looks super smart. And then models compress data by finding patterns and connections. So this is the pre-training model. So basically when you push all of that unlabeled data, the model finds patterns and connections between them and then creates a way, like a brain, like the neurons connecting with each other's to make kind of logic and connecting dots from all of the data it is consuming. And then they talk about pre-training vs reasoning. They just compare the two topics. It's a big debate till now. And they say pre-training provides broad-based intelligence. So this is the general intelligence that all AI companies are looking for. And then they talk reasoning capabilities are more spiky and lumpy in specific areas. So you can get a model to reason well in certain areas, but doesn't really give it that kind of ability to generalize like a human does. And then they address perplexity and test loss. So they talk about, how do you measure a model really as it is being trained? Are things going well? Things going bad? How do you fix it? How do you monitor it? Again, just high level. They don't reveal anything specific. Obviously, even at one moment, even Sam Altman was asking one of the team there that if you can say it here and out loud, basically hinting that there are secrets they have and they cannot reveal as an organization. Okay, that makes sense. So here they were saying success measured by prediction ability on held out data. So this is what I mentioned before. So they hold out data of the training. This is like really secure data, and this is like precious data, I would call it, because this is the data that tells them is the model really doing well or not, because they are 100% sure this data the model has never seen before. So it's not coming because it was trained, so the kind of a memory of the model, and it's just not trained on it like directly, repeating what it was trained on. So in addressing any problem or answering any question. So they know if they test it with this data, they can get their answer about the performance. And they mention here the monorepo loss using internal code as clean test data. Again, they have their own code data internally to test. Lower test loss correlates with more intelligence. Again, this is the general idea, well known. So as the loss improves, they can tell or predict that the model will be much more intelligent. Okay, so this is for the science behind it. Didn't reveal a lot, a little bit disappointing for a 46-minute podcast. And then they go into the future, and I will not really spend time on this, but they talk about what they have learned of going into the next huge training. And again, here they talk about this is something in the past already, because GPT 4.5 was announced like 2 months back, if I'm not mistaken. So, but they talk about it as if it's a success and something that happened a year back. I don't know. So that was a hint about talking about the future, so they're already, it seemed like they're already putting GPT 4.5 behind their backs. And they talk about a hypothetical situation here. If they are running a training with 10 million GPUs working together on an AI system, how they would handle that. And they talk about the idea of GPT 5.5. And then no clear algorithm limits have been found yet. So when it comes to the algorithm itself, the sky is the limit. Limitation was in compute. That is over. Now it's more about data as a bottleneck. And then they talk again about data efficiency that will drive the next wave of innovation. So how do you get more intelligence from the same data? We have lots of human data available for these companies already. Maybe they can make it higher quality, or from the same data, they can actually get the model to learn more or more efficiently, as they say here. And lastly, they mention some moments and positive learnings and things around the team going through this process and learning. So pretty much, I hope I've done it under the 10-minute mark for you, but this is what the whole podcast was about. Now, let's move to the 4.1 GPT API model that was dropped literally yesterday or before yesterday. Again, 2 days or 1 day from the podcast. So we'll go through what they're saying on their page about these API models, and then we're going to test it in the playground together. I'm going to give it one single shot complex test. I'll make a judgment just based on that, and I'll tell you why later on. And you will see the hints piling up as we go through the 4.1 API page that they have on OpenAI. And by the end, again, I'm repeating here, I apologize, but you'll know everything about 4.5. You'll really understand 4.1 and the access to the API. You'll see me testing it, and I will reveal what I think happened. Okay, so this is the page where they introduced the GPT 4.1 in the API. So I'll go as fast as I can in this. I'll just cover the highlights / there's a hint hidden here. Other information is just interesting for you to know, but you will see the hint super obvious here, but I'll have to address it at the end. So here the focus is the 4.1 API. So here they start with talking about that they're launching the 3 new models as part of the API: GPT 4.1, GPT 4.1 mini, and GPT 4.1 nano. So nano is a new term that we have with OpenAI models. It is confusing. We just had 4.5. Why you're going back to 4.1? Again, this is one more hint for me. Okay, when I read this, why 4.1? So these models outperform GPT-4o and GPT-4o mini across the board, with major gains in coding and instruction following. So instruction following is a big deal. If you use AI, if you prompt AI, especially if you work with agents, sometimes you struggle to get the model or the agent to follow your instructions. This apparently does it better. And here they say that the models really excel in 3 areas. So the first one is coding, and here they mention that it is already scoring 54.6% on the software engineering bench, and this is 21.4% over GPT-4.0. So they will associate it highly with GPT-4.0 because this is the standard non-reasoning model. So that's that. And then they talk about instruction following, and they have benchmarks for that. Actually, I think they open source a benchmark for that. We will go into that later. But this is much better as a model to follow instructions. I'm already, by the way, running it on an agent. I have a personal agent, and I can see off the bat that this is true. It does follow instructions clearly much more closely. So the prompt can become lighter because with the basic prompt that you gave that the model now 4.1, it will follow your instructions. So that's something I can confirm for you. And then the surprise, I don't know if this is coming off the back of, obviously well-known Gemini with their big context models, and now other companies coming out with big context as well. So this could be, most recent is Meta. So this could be just their way of joining that. There's a big race going between these companies, and sometimes it gets silly, honestly. I think the only wise one out of the bunch, in my opinion, is Anthropic and Claude. While they're overtaken now by, I think, Gemini 2.5 Pro in coding, but still they are the wise ones. So now you have a huge context window, and this is multimodal, so that is across the board. So they talk about that here. You can read the page for yourself. I'll not go point by point. I'm sure if you're interested, you will, and you're that kind of person, you'll go and read the whole thing. And here they are talking about the intelligence of the models and the latency. So it is more intelligent. You can see again, GPT-4.0, it's more intelligent than GPT-4.0 and as latent. So it's as fast. And then you have here the comparison of GPT 4.1 mini and how smarter it is compared to 4.0 mini. So there's a big gap between these mini models. And then Nano is like the super fast model that is less intelligent, not in a big way, but less intelligent than GPT-4.0 mini. Some people might have these use cases like quick chat, small WhatsApp support type of thing. You might not need anything smarter than a Nano 4.1 model. We carry on here, and here they are talking about the improvements in instruction following, and they say these improvements in instruction following, reliability, and long context comprehension also makes GPT 4.1 models considerably more effective at powering agents. So this is what the thing I just mentioned to you about my agent, or systems that can independently accomplish tasks on behalf of the users. When I read this paragraph, I actually said, let me try this on my agent, and it did perform well, especially that we'll look at it in a second, but the cost of 4.1 is very similar to 4.0. When combined with primitive like Responses API, developers can now build agents that are more useful and reliable at real-world software engineering, extracting insights from large documents, resolving customer requests with minimal hand-holding and other complex tasks. So things are just getting easier with this. Now, here in these two paragraphs, I want you to focus closely. This is an important part, believe me. So I'm going to read this one word by word. Again, big hint is here. You can get it for yourself. Later on, we'll discuss it. So note that GPT 4.1 will only be available via the API. In ChatGPT, many of the improvements in instruction following, coding, and intelligence have been gradually incorporated into the latest version of GPT 4.0. And we will continue to incorporate more with future releases. Okay, so they're taking the intelligence of 4.1 and in coding and following instructions and injecting it in 4.0. I don't know how that works, but this is what they're claiming. Now, let's read this paragraph. We will also begin depreciating GPT 4.5 preview in the API. So this huge thing they did a podcast about, they will depreciate. I was waiting for them to say, the full model will come through. Let's read on. As GPT 4.1 offers improved or similar performance on many key capabilities at much lower cost and latency, GPT 4.5 preview will be turned off in 3 months on July 14th, 2025 to allow time for the developers to transition. GPT 4.5 was introduced as a research preview to explore and experiment with a large compute-intensive model, and we've learned a lot from developer feedback. We'll continue to carry forward the creativity, writing quality, humor, and nuances you told us you appreciated in GPT 4.5 into future API models. They're killing GPT 4.5, the model they did a podcast about on YouTube. So that wasn't to learn about GPT 4.5, that was the obituary of GPT 4.5. Let's carry on. And here they talk about coding and they go through the coding benchmarks. Again, you can look into this on your own time. It's very interesting. To be fair, compare this model across all of them to more to 4.0 compared to other models that they have in OpenAI, the reasoning ones, the giants, the OGs of coding. But this one definitely does a really good punch when it comes to coding. And you can see this is GPT 4.1 at 55%. Again, this is one of the benchmark. And you can compare it, for example, to the 49% with OpenAI's O3 Mini High, which is a really good coding model. And they talk about the specific of each of the benchmarks. And again, you can do a lot with this because it's in the API. And for common users, you'll have to go to the playground to use it if you want to use it in coding without building a system of your own. But again, the capability of coding, they're saying it will come to 4.0 in the future. That kind of intelligence they're injecting into 4.0 that we know and we use today in the interface, the normal ChatGPT interface. And here, this is a paragraph that I call BS on, honestly, because I just checked something. It gave me a different perspective. But it's just they over-explain why they're killing GPT 4.5, honestly. So let's read this quickly. For API developers looking to edit large files, GPT 4.1 is much more reliable at code diffs across a range of formats. GPT 4.1 more than doubles GPT 4.0's score on Ada's polyglot diff benchmark and even beats GPT 4.5 by 8%. This evaluation is both a measure of coding capability across various programming languages and a measure of models' ability to produce changes in whole and diff formats. So it beats 4.5, that huge, amazing model we did the podcast about. If you're confused by the whole and diff, this is just a benchmark to test coding ability where you give, and this is my understanding, I never tested it, where you give a coding file, a complete file to the model and you ask it to either look at it, find improvements or errors and solve the whole thing, change the whole thing all at once, or find sections or blocks of code that needs to be improved, which is the diff part, and improve them or change them. So they test both apparently in that benchmark. So for best code diff performance, please refer to our prompting guide for developers who prefer rewriting entire files. We've increased output token limits for GPT 4.1 to 32,768 tokens, up from 16,384 tokens for GPT 4.0. We also recommend using predicted outputs to reduce latency of full file writes. Okay, so there's a prompting guide by OpenAI, so that's interesting. And I thought at this stage of intelligence in these models, we got to the point where the model can prompt better than a human or a guide can. So they can actually train the model to learn the guide and help us prompt. I keep ranting in the middle because maybe I'm just older than the AI audience who are in their 20s, maybe early 30s. But I think there's lots of hype drive in the AI community. We've achieved the general artificial intelligence. AGI is here. Super intelligence is here. I don't think so. I think these things are amazing. Like I use them every day. I spend hundreds of dollars every year on just API calls. But I think people should tone it down a little bit. Companies should slow it down a little bit. I know they're competing for investor money now, and thanks God that none of them, at least aside from obviously Google, are public yet, because when they go public, they will go crazy. I guarantee you that. So they talk about these kind of coding benchmark. Again, you can see here, you can see it for whole file, as we said, or diff. And they talk about it. And here is just an explanation of the same. And they take us through some use cases. Some of them is what they showcased during the video they dropped on YouTube when they actually introduced the API for the GPT 4.1 models. And then here they talk a bit more about instruction following. So they say GPT 4.1 follows instructions more reliably, and we've measured significant improvements across a variety of instructions following evals. Okay, that's good. And here they talk about their own evaluation of instruction following. So they have their own eval or evaluation that comes to that, and it covers format following that you can see here, negative instructions, order instructions, content requirements, and then ranking and overconfidence. So overconfidence is sometime when you ask the model, and all of this, by the way, is prompting science, more or less. But overconfidence is you will have to, in many cases, and I still do it sometimes, prompt the model to ask questions if it doesn't know, because many times models have their machines, but as if they have an urge to, once they get a prompt, to say something. So even if they don't know the answer, they will have to regurgitate something out for you, and that could be a hallucination. So overconfidence is something that actually, let me read it. It's actually instructing the model to say, I don't know, or similar, if requested information isn't available, or the request doesn't fall into a given category. And even ask questions, I think falls under that. So all of these things about how you prompt and how the AI model takes in the prompt and follows those instructions is something they're working on. And I think this is much more as a frontier than any other areas these companies are focusing on. Get more out of the model and with what we have already existing in terms of technology. I think that's an important thing. Again, they talk about their own eval. I think they're open sourcing this eval as well. And here they're talking about multi-turn instruction following is critical for many developers. It's important for the model to maintain coherence deep into the conversation and keep track of what the user told it earlier. So again, here they talk about the big context. So these models are coming with a 1 million token context. So that's a big deal for OpenAI. And they're talking that, yes, we've done that like other companies, but we're focusing about the model's ability to really read through that context and get the right information at all times. So any model, even Gemini 2.5, with its huge context, after some time, when, especially on coding projects, it will start losing its brains because it has lots of data to look at and starts making mistakes. So here they're just telling you and showing you this 4.1 GPT model's ability, and they call it a needle in haystack test, to find a needle, basically. And this is like a subtle needle in OpenAI, not even a needle, not even a clear piece of information, a hinted piece of information in a huge context. The model is super good in recovering that. And here they take you through the different evals of that. Again, this is, if you're interested in this stuff, it's interesting for me. I go and I read it myself, so go and read it. But this says that GPT 4.1 is really good in working with a long context, that here they go into the details of it and they show you these needle and haystack type of benchmarks and tests. And again, they talk about everything that has to do with the context. So for this one, let me just read the first paragraph, which is interesting, and the first time we get it with OpenAI. So GPT 4.1, 4.1 mini, and 4.1 nano can process up to 1 million tokens of context, up from 128,000 for previous GPT-4o models. 1 million tokens is more than 8 copies of the entire React codebase. So long context is great fit for processing large code bases or lots of long documents. So definitely interesting. I do my own vibe coding mini projects, and usually even I hit those kind of context limits in the current models. This definitely is something I will explore in the future, maybe not now. It's a pity that this is not in the normal ChatGPT interface. I think it would be 4.0 as they claim, but we'll see. So here they say, we trained GPT 4.1 to reliably attend to information across the full 1 million context length. We've also trained it to be far more reliable than GPT 4.0 at noticing relevant text. Basically, this is like it's not the same, but it's like the retrieval augmented generation when you look at a vector store. So, but this is within cache. It's like the cache part of it, or the version of it. So here they're saying, this is what I mentioned before. It is so good at finding these, like not even a needle in a haystack, but even like a semi-needle in a haystack. And you can see here they're talking about the needle positioned at various points within the context window. And they have all of these benchmarks later that talks about the ability of the model to retrieve specific information from the huge context that you might use and feed that model with. So I'm going to stop at this point. Other than that, this is multimodal, it has vision, so you can give it an image, it will analyze it, and it's good at that, even better than 4.0 obviously. And the pricing that is for the GPT 4.1, it's very similar to 4.0. So nothing better financially in using 4.1 compared to 4.0, but this is definitely has more to offer through the API. So anyone using the API probably will go with this one rather than 4.0. It definitely gets much cheaper with the 4.1 mini and the 4.1 nano. So you can see the nano, like the nano is like the closest I can say for free as a model, at least for OpenAI. So I'm going to stop here, and now I will just take you to where we look at what people are saying about the model so far in 2 days, GPT 4.1 compared to other models, and then we'll go test it for ourselves. And I'll explain the test later, and I'll tell you why I'm doing this test, which might seem too much for OpenAI and unfair to OpenAI to give it such a test. Okay, so if we look at the benchmark they were referring to when it comes to the GPT 4.1, and we look at, this is the polyglot coding leaderboard. So this is what they were talking about in their page on OpenAI about GPT 4.1 models. And you can see here they're looking at two things. Percent correct, it's an easy way to think about it as how good it is, the model, and then the cost, okay? And you can look at all of the models ranked from top to bottom. You can see at the top, we have Gemini 2.5 Pro, which I can vouch that today it is the best coding with a huge context model out there. Obviously behind it is Claude 3.7, and then you get DeepSeek R1 plus Claude 3.5, and then you get O1 from OpenAI, and then you get Claude 3.7 Sonnet. This is without thinking. So the above one was with the thinking mode enabled, and then you get O3 Mini, DeepSeek R1, DeepSeek V3, some other model, O3 Mini Medium, Grok 3 Beta, and then you get like, there's even Optimus Alpha, which I don't know as a model, and then you get GPT 4.1. It's a moment of silence because what's so great about it? Is it the model that made sense to kill 4.5 for? People don't think so. And you told people about this benchmark. So let's go for testing 4.1 on its coding ability. Let's see if it's as good as OpenAI claims. So this is the prompt that I will test with GPT 4.1. And here I'm asking it to create for me an app, a web app with a user interface where I can talk to a voice agent that is connected to an MCP SSE type of server, like the Zapier MCP server. And it will do actions for me. And also I wanted to use the native OpenAI SDK web search tool. And that's it. And I want maybe fancy visuals in the user interface. All models failed to get me this to work. And I got it to work, by the way. This app, I'll show it to you. If you want to see something about it, write me a comment in the comment section. And let me show you the app actually before I talk about the prompt. This is the app and it's fully operational. You can select what kind of voice you want. It will run actions for you, actually thousands of actions. So let me just give you a glimpse. I will not run an action. I can do that in a deep dive in the future. So let me allow the mic. Hey Habibi, how are you doing?
Ahla wa sahla, Samir Basha. I'm doing well, thank you for asking. How about you, my dear friend?
So you can see it works. So this is what I want the 4.1 GPT to do for me. And I don't think it's too much to expect of OpenAI. Like, one of the biggest frustration I have with whatever model I deal with is train the model on your documentation. Make it easy to build based on your documentation with your model. Like, I know there's technical challenges to this, but in my mind, at least for developers, the biggest win to open developing to more people is that even create a small model that is really trained on your documentations at all times, and it can answer questions. The OpenAI SDK is great, still it's complex. It is something that will take you a lot of effort to vibe code through. And by the way, if you really vibe code, and this is again one mini rant in the middle, developers and software engineer jobs are not going away. This is BS I see all over the internet. If you try to vibe code something serious, and I'll tell you, just go with this. Try to create a voice agent based on OpenAI SDK. Try to do it and vibe code it with an AI model. Tell me how easy it is. For a software engineer or a developer, they will do it in half an hour just by looking at the documentation, and they'll figure it out. Go try to vibe code it. I did. It's not easy. It took me multiple tries with different models. The only time I got it to work is even not fully by Gemini 2.5. Actually, it's Gemini 2.5 with some help through Claude 3.7 with thinking mode on and other things through Replit. The Replit agent even helped me there. So this is the playground of OpenAI. So if you have a membership, I think only Plus and Pro users have access to this. Maybe I'm wrong. But if you go to the dashboard, OpenAI dashboard online login, and then you click at this button here, the playground, this is where you get. You can test everything. You can test prompts, real-time voice assistants, and then text-to-speech, all of that great stuff that OpenAI has. So here, you have to select the GPT 4.1. So I have it selected. And let me go for the details here. I'll not tamper with the temperature. I'll crank up the max tokens. And the reason I'm doing that is if it takes too much code to generate this, well, I'll give it all the freedom. I even will give it access to the internet. So here you can select more tools. You can create a tool actually through a function, and you can create file search. So with this, I assume it has the ability to go to the internet and look at its own documentation as OpenAI. And then I will give it the prompt, which I will simply go back here, copy everything, go for it, and paste it for the model. And then I will run the whole thing. And once I get the result, you will see the result coming in. I will take it to Replit, run a test there, and I'll show you what we get. It's a one-time thing. If it gets it, if I hear a voice, basically if I say a prompt in voice and I get a response in audio, I will give this GPT 4.1 a 5 out of 5, and probably I will change what I'm going to say at the end, if that happens. So let's see. So here goes nothing. I'll give it the prompt, and let's wait for the coding to take place. Super fast, by the way. So this is what I noticed. So it's proposing a flow for me, thinking about security, and it's asking me to create secrets here. It is interesting the way it's going. Okay, so install requirements, and here I have the application itself, and then I have the front end, and then I have the front end, which is the JavaScript to handle the audio, and then it's giving me a recap. And here you can see it's telling me test and let me know how it runs. So let me prepare it on Replit, and I'll show you what we get. Okay, so I sorted everything out based on the code it gave me, and let's run and see what we get. And here goes nothing. Okay, so I got one error. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, and I'll just do maybe a couple of debuggings. This is a small error. Okay, it gave me a fix. Let's see how it runs now. It's running. We're getting some kind of interface. It's basic, and I'm okay with that. Let me actually open a separate tab, and you can see talk to Habibi, basically the name of the AI. And I will hit this, and here goes nothing. Allow access to the microphone. Hey Habibi, how are you doing? Yeah, looking at the console, we got lots of errors. It's typical. I mean, it's not an easy thing. I've experienced it for myself. I know some people might say this is too much to expect from GPT 4.1. I'll just give it one more try, and I'll give you my final thoughts of what I think is happening in OpenAI before we conclude this video. Let me try for the third and final time. Okay, so it's here. Let's put it in full screen. Let's hit talk. Hey, how are you, Habibi? How are you doing? Yeah, we got errors. So I'll stop here. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen the hints all across this video, and while going into the GPT 4.5 discussion, it felt, if you watch the video, it's palpable, like you can feel it. It felt as if they talk about something totally from the past. And the hint that I didn't show here, but was a big hint as well, if you watched the GPT 4.1 launch, which is a very short video, you can go and watch it. They talk about GPT 4.5 as an exciting experiment. And yes, it went out in preview, but talking about it as an exciting experiment is something else. I don't think anyone was expecting 4.5 to get killed this fast. Now, we've all noticed how expensive it is. People probably are not using it. It probably cost them millions to actually run. And I'm pretty sure today it is running at big losses as a model, because no one will run a model that expensive unless you have super unique, super fitting use case for such a model. I think at some point they realized it's a big failure. They did the launch. Now that was missing Sam Altman. Maybe that was a strategic move when GPT 4.5 was launched. And I don't think it picked up as they wanted or expected it to do. They keep saying that people are saying amazing things about it. I've seen some people say positive things about 4.5. I did test it, to be fair, not extensively, but I didn't feel it was so special. But many people were saying we don't see anything special. Definitely, if there's anything special, that goes away with the price point. So I think at some point they wanted to kill it. They wanted to do it in a subtle way. So they wanted to focus that this was an experiment, an exciting experiment that probably cost OpenAI tens, if not hundreds of millions to do. They say it's 2 years project. So imagine those hundreds of people they talk about, their salaries for 2 years. Imagine the actual compute that they did across all of these clusters or data centers that they say they did it in a staggered and kind of a separate manner. That could easily pile up to be in the hundreds of millions, not even tens only. So how do you kill such a project? How do you kill such a giant that you put out there that's so special in replicating the human way of basically speech or text? And in the podcast, they talk about that the biggest challenge is generalizing, and it's 100,000 times worse or behind when it comes to AI compared to humans in text and understanding language. I felt they were compensating a lot to many things that they pinned as selling points to GPT 4.5 and things that they linked to this model as special and differentiating aspects from all other models. So they put a lot there and they saw the ship sinking basically. And they wanted the ship to sink. They were fine with that, clearly, but they wanted to save these things they pinned to that ship. So they did a podcast to talk about it as, in my opinion, and again, I like OpenAI. I have nothing against them. I'm probably an OpenAI fanboy, by the way. Use their API more than anything else I have in terms of other models. But I'll have to say what I think was happening there. So they wanted to salvage all of these ideas that their models can deliver and take it somewhere else. So they came with a GPT 4.1, which is like 4 points behind if we're trying to interpret the numbers in these model namings that OpenAI uses. So from 4.5, well, we take 4 points back and we are at 4.1. Yeah, and we have great things here. And by the way, in some of these things, we even beat GPT 4.5. So that was a good experiment. You know, it's just, let's put it in the drawer and good night. It was a big project that was a failure on many aspects. Probably they have more details around that. They will not share with everyone. Financial failure. What they say is these models all lose money. I think this is at a different scale of money loss. It's expensive to run. It's not being used. It's not being even appreciated. And it's not even ranking top in all the benchmarks around these AI models. So it was time to kill it, but they wanted to take some organs out of that model. So they took out those organs and they implanted them in the GPT-4.0, and they said, hey, we have, the patient became a new person, and that person is a better, faster, smarter, with more context, and we call it GPT 4.1. The part I didn't get, hey, you're getting it only on the API, and we're injecting some of that intelligence and the things we've learned from that amazing experiment we did with GPT 4.5. We're injecting it in GPT 4.40 that you are already having in the interface. And that was the end of the week. It is always interesting and intriguing to uncover what they talk about when they give us even hints of information. I think GPT 4.1 is definitely interesting. I wouldn't call it the best in coding with my test. From the first go, Gemini 2.5 did way better. So this is not to compare it to anything that is topping the charts today, honestly. Maybe developers can do a lot with it. We'll have to wait and see. But again, I think the race of these AI companies is getting silly. It's pushing them to a corner where they have to push something just to prove a point or beat a market or, just get a hype or ride that hype with the audience and get maybe new members and subscribers to get more investors. That's the whole kind of startup cycle that's crazy, I think, and at some point becomes detrimental to the product that they're creating. I don't feel they're creating products for consumers anymore. I feel they're creating products to compete with each other, with the exceptions, honestly, to Anthropic. I think Anthropic is the exception, and Claude 3.7, even if it's beaten by the huge, so remember, Google is a huge giant. They're beaten by Google and Gemini 2.5, but I think the most strategic AI company today is Anthropic. And I think, yes, today Gemini 2.5 is better. I don't know how long that will last. So if Anthropic play their cards well, I think they're the most balanced. They don't follow these kind of trends, not always at least, and they have a great model on their hand. And I think this will be the kind of foundation for coders and developers as a model. It will never be anything else. Others will complement, but I think eventually, if Claude and Anthropic continue down that path, they will be the go-to AI model for coding. And with this, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it's long, it's interesting, it's intriguing. You have the chapters, watch it as you wish. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to like the video, make a comment, tell me about what you think about the whole thing, what we discussed, what we covered. Did you get these hints as well? And hey, why not subscribe? It's for free. Thank you for giving me your time today, and goodbye.
Subscribe to Daddy's channel. Give me the mic.